Welcome to episode 3 of the QCA Wrestle podcast with Rob Hill and Jay Zymet. Our guest today is Eric Juergens. Eric was the 11th four-time Iowa High School state champion. He had an incredible college career at Iowa and now runs the Young Guns Wrestling Club here in the Quad Cities. Eric shared some really good stories and insight with us, and it was great talking with him in this episode. To see more of our content, check out our website at qcawrestle.com. Also, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and on Apple Podcasts or Spotify.
All right, welcome everyone to QCA Wrestle. Today we got a very special guest with us, Eric Juergens. Just give you a little update or history on Eric. He's 1996. He became the 11th four-time state champion, going 144-0 in his high school career for Maquoketa to Cardinals. He attended the University of Iowa and became a two-time Big Ten champion, four-time All-American, two-time national champion, and is, as of 2002, is a co-founder of Young Guns Wrestling Club. Eric, welcome to the cast.
What's going on?
Yeah, Eric, thank you for joining us. So I wanted to, as a special, Young Guns is one of the best clubs in the country. We're lucky to have right here in the Quad Cities, we've got at Augustana College, right, you have your club. And I wanted to represent, I've got a Young Guns shirt on today. This was from I believe this is from last year, maybe 2 years ago, but the Virginia Beach duels that you always send teams to. So, yeah, big Young Guns fan for sure.
Kind of bad news there. We officially are pulling out of Virginia Beach this year. They postponed to July 4th and family vacations and everything else. And not to mention, depending on how this goes, it could get delayed even further. We're gonna pull back on Virginia Beach this year, which is kind of disappointing, but the way it goes.
Yeah, it's a bummer, but unfortunately, it's not unexpected. With everything else in our current situation. So, actually, that leads us into. I guess what are your thoughts? If you talk a little about this crazy pandemic we got going on, what are you doing, I guess, to get through it? And then what do you recommend that a wrestler does to kind of keep active during this time?
As far as just trying to get through it, I'm following the guidelines that everybody else is, home quarantine for the most part, unless you absolutely have to leave. I'm lucky enough that my job, I can work from home. I'm in sales. I sell firearms. So anywhere I have a phone and email, I can do what I need to do for the most part. As far as getting active, get outside, take runs, body lifts. Most guys, besides the younger crowd, I should say, they've been doing this for a while. They know how to run. They know how to do their push-ups, their pull-ups, their sit-ups. Get out there and do some of the chores around the house that, your old man or your mother's been, nagging at you forever to do.
Yeah.
Get out there and do some of those. So,
Sure. Excellent. Well, why don't you tell us a little about your start in wrestling, Eric? How did you get into the sport? Was it in your family before, or was you and your brother the start of it, or what?
No, my dad never wrestled. I was at school one day. I was in third grade, and there was a little flyer on the wall. It was Redbird Wrestling is what it was called, and it was 4 Mondays out of the year. And I remember taking it home, telling my parents, "Hey, this would be really neat." And next thing you know, me and my brother tried it, but it was only 4 Mondays in a row, and we would try to go to competitions and just get murdered. And so I want to say either 5th or 6th grade, my dad got together with a couple other dads, the Cleavers, the Wilsons, Matt Redling's dad. I know I'll forget some names, but we got a kind of a little group core, and we all started practicing. And before you know it, I think by the end of the year, we had probably 24 kids practicing 2 times a week, and rules were all different back then. We talked to Coach Tampier, Jeff Tampier, who's a high school coach, and, they asked if we could get in the room, and they let us in the room. And I do think things are a little different. It's not quite so easy just to go in and use the wrestling room. So,
yeah. Who were some of the wrestlers as you were growing up that you kind of saw as role models, or maybe helped influence your style in wrestling?
I'll be honest. As far, I remember going to a couple Iowa meets when we were younger, and obviously Tom and Terry Brands. I mean, when those guys came on Iowa Public Television, I mean, we were glued to the screen. But there was never a big focus on sports in our family. We lived out in the country. I hear all the time who are some of your role models or mentors, and I always looked up. To be honest, we had our neighborhood was a bunch of blue collar workers, and guys out there, and just, I don't care what the elements were. They went out and they worked, and there was never complaining. They just got the job done. And I can vividly remember, wanting to be tough like they were when I was younger. So, I mean, that was kind of my experience.
Yeah, that's cool.
So Maquoketa is a more rural area, farming district. Is that correct? You're pretty close, right, Eric?
Pretty close to that little town called DeWitt.
Yeah, just north of it.
Yeah, so yeah, it's a very small town. I think population's around 5,000, 6,000. Very rural, a lot of farm folk, and then general laborers, that kind of thing.
So, okay, taking on the next step, Eric, when you think about your opponents, people you wrestled in your career, who are a couple that stick out in your mind today, and why?
I don't know. I'll be honest. I never really focused on everybody else. I know it sounds weird, especially in today's world of message boards. Everybody follows the forums and message boards, and there's so much social media. But I mean, you go back. And I hate to say this. Obviously, you're a little ahead of me, Jay. But the internet was not. It was just starting to catch on. I can remember going to college, and I'm pretty sure that was my first real interaction with emails and stuff like that. And so there wasn't near the focus on all these people that you do now. Nowadays, people are going on track wrestling, people are going on flow wrestling, and who's who of wrestling and whatnot. And it was not like that in our family, at least. Wrestling was just something we did. You worked hard, you did your practices, you went and competed. And then when you weren't wrestling, the focus was not on wrestling. The focus is on what we were doing. So it's just a different time, I think.
How about wrestlers in the Iowa room that helped you make that next transition to the Iowa style wrestling? Who are a couple wrestlers in there that helped you evolve? And I mean, coming in as an undefeated high school wrestler with your record and accolades, what was it like stepping into that room?
That was a nightmare. It was stepping into a living nightmare. People ask me all the time. Tom and Terry Brands were still wrestling all the time. Obviously, Terry Brands was still competing. I mean, he competed in the 2000 Olympics. So you had Tom, you had Terry, you had Mark Ironside, you had Joe Williams, you had Lincoln McEravy, Jesse Whitmer, Mike Mena. Some of my teammates that came in when I did, Doug Schwab. I'm forgetting names, TJ Williams, Jody Stripmatter came in when I was a junior. It was just, I'm telling you, that room was just filled with hammers.
So cool.
Wow.
Yeah. So what do you accredit your success as a wrestler to, and how did you carry that over into coaching?
I think it's a little bit of everything. The older I get, the more I look back and reflect on things. I think there's a good combination of everything coming together to be ultra successful in anything. I don't think there's such thing as self-made. I'll tell you that. You hear it all the time, self-made man or woman or whatever. And anybody who's achieved success has had multiple people surrounding them, helping them achieve that goal. Like I look back on my family, and it was similar to what we have now, in the sense that my dad would drive an hour to work, an hour back home. And as we got into it, he would pick us boys up, and twice a week we'd drive an hour to Dubuque to wrestle, and then an hour back home. So, I mean, on the days we were practicing, he was driving in that car 4 hours, and I mean, he was the one that wanted to make sure we were doing it. I mean, yeah, we wanted to go practice and everything, but you look at that driving force, there's no doubt we were kids. There's no doubt there was nudging from my dad. We went to so many different tournaments, and my parents were not well off, and yet when we wanted to go wrestle somewhere, we did. So I look at it that standpoint. I look at it from in terms of just as a person. You've got to have the drive. You have to have the determination. You have to have a certain level of ability that you can foster. So there's all those components too. And then I think just the simple access to the tools to be good. We had a fairly good couple teachers from when I started. Chuck Wilson was a state place winner, which back then having a state place winner train you was unbelievable. When it was just a lot of dads usually in a room that never wrestled. I can remember, Coach Tampier, still ultra respected by just about anybody in the state of Iowa. Having a great coach. Go to college. Dan Gable was my coach for 2 years. Terry Brands, Jim Zaleski, not to mention training partners. From when I started to when I end, I always had quality training partners. And I don't think with all of those, little variables coming together, I don't think I have the career I did. So.
Awesome. Thank you for that summary. Yeah, man, it's a lot of things had to happen, I think, to all of us really to mold us into the people we are. I tell my sons a lot about how lucky we are where we live. We get to come over and get coached by 4-time state champion Eric Juergens, national champion Eric Juergens. Here in Bettendorf, we've got another 4-time state champion, Dan Knight. Where we're at is just an unbelievable place to be for wrestling development. So
yeah, the Quad City. I mean, if you look at it, Quad City area for a population of 400,000, having how many? There's quite a few national champions walking around in the Quad Cities. There's Pete Bush, there's Matt Lackey, there's myself. Well, Matt Lackey's left, but I mean, as far as coming from the Quad Cities, I mean, it's always been just a crazy good area for high-level wrestling.
Eric, you kind of touched on my next question I had for you, but who would be the toughest coach you ever had, and why?
Toughest coach?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a tough one. Some of the work. I mean, if it comes just to straight down workouts and just no worry about how you felt at the time, I mean, it's definitely Dan Gable. I can remember back before they outlawed, sauna suits and everything like that, and saunas, and when it was time to start buckling down, Gable had no problem coming in and making sure you did what you needed to do, no matter how you felt. It didn't matter. And so that was probably a huge adjustment for me, I think. You had guys like Coach Tampier, who day in, day out, rigorous. This was the way we were going to do things. We were always going to do it to, the best of our ability, and we were going to accept nothing less. So there's a certain toughness in that as well. As far as difficulty, just doing the right thing all the time, no matter, if somebody's watching or not, whether you wanted to do the extra laps or not, it didn't matter how you felt, you were going to do it and do it the right way. So I don't know. Every coach brings a lot to the table, obviously.
You mentioned, the sauna suits and how everything's changed. That the weight changes and the regulations, rules, that changed while you were in college. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I was in my redshirt year, and I don't know if everybody's really familiar with how this went down or whatnot, but basically what it came down to is creatine had come out maybe a year before. It was starting to really catch on popularity-wise, and creatine holds water in the muscles, right? And by holding water in the muscles, you have more muscle mass. More muscle mass, obviously, is physics, pushes more. And so you can push your muscles a little further, get better gains. Obviously, for the athletes that wanted to get, I guess, a little bit more jacked, a little faster, creatine was really, really popular. It was helping people make gains really fast. The problem was when it transitioned into the wrestling season, because it would hold water in the muscles, as people started to cut these massive amounts of weight that have, in the past they've always been able to get through, the vitals were some of the things that were starting to lose the water, and you had these coaches throwing people in the room and the sauna or guys doing it voluntarily. It's not like I was there for some of the deaths, but long story short, when they started to get to that point of dehydration, their vitals were the ones, their vital organs were the ones that were really missing the water just as much as their muscles. And pretty soon you had organ failure and, unfortunately three guys had to die before they finally, it's kind of like this pandemic right now. They shut things down. Like they didn't know what was going on, but we needed to control the situation. So they shut things down and tried to evaluate it. And they're like, look, this will have to be a temporary measure till we can figure out how to adjust to what is going on. Because we've never seen this in all the history of wrestling. Wrestling's been around for 2,000 some years, and all of a sudden we're having these issues. So that was kind of scary, trying to figure out why. But yeah, so they said, heck with it. We're not going to cut any more weight. You had to wrestle your weight class X amount of times, and this was past tense. So it wasn't like you could go back and fudge what you did. You had to have been at that weight class for a certain amount of competitions, and therefore you were granted that weight class plus 7 pounds. And it was that simple. You had to move up 7 pounds. No one was allowed to drop. So you couldn't say be a 149 pounder, which at that time it wasn't 149, I don't think, but and then drop down to 142 or 141. It didn't work. You had to stay at the weight class you were, and then bit by bit they figure out kind of what the deal was, and then they changed the rules to make the sport better down the road. There's a lot less emphasis on weight cutting. I still do think a lot of people out there try to cut a lot of weight. I don't necessarily think it's the smartest idea or the best idea, but I mean, everybody has their different way of approaching the sport too.
History I didn't realize. Thank you.
Eric, what's your philosophy on off-season wrestling?
I mean, you got to be doing something. You have to be. Somebody said the other day, actually, it might have been your guys' podcast. Like anything on the planet, if you want to get better at a certain skill, you do that skill over and over. I don't think wrestling's any different. If you do want to get better at wrestling, then you wrestle more. There's a huge push on weights. There's a huge push on conditioning. And I think they're just like I talked about before, when it comes to success, you have to have every component. And the stronger you are, the less technical you have to be. But there's always that intersecting line of where strength and technique have to have a mesh, because without one or the other, to a certain degree, I don't care how strong you are or how technical you are, you're not going to be ultra successful without a good intersection of that line. I'm a big believer in like freestyle and Greco, and I think Jake kind of touched down on this, but the skills freestyle will teach you, a lot of guys learn the hard way. And I don't know if there's a better way to explain it. I can tell them till they're blue in the face, like keep their head up when they're wrestling, lower their elevation. But most kids don't do that. Most kids put their head down, butt in the air, and do what they can to keep people from getting to their legs, which is all fine and dandy when somebody's not good at a front headlock. But now you go to freestyle where you can get scored on a front headlock, and take it a step further, it's a painful way to score. Like when someone scores on you, it's literally physically painful. And they say, pain is a great teacher. It's the mother of all teachers, baby. And so you have these kids who go into freestyle and Greco, and they're getting front headlocked, and they're putting their tooth through their lip, and they're having, they're getting up off the mat, and their face is just purple from where somebody was squeezing their forearm on their face. And you know what? They start putting their head up, and they start getting really good at inside ties, and they start really, really getting those skills And once you've learned them, you can't unlearn them. It's like a bicycle. When you go back to folk style, you keep your head up and you get your butt down. You get in a good stance, and that makes you easier to get your legs back. And it's a revolving door. Every time you build on one skill, it's helping another skill down the road.
Yeah. Did when you were a youth, well, I guess when you were wrestling, did you do a lot of freestyle Greco?
We practiced it a lot. We only competed in it so often. I did go to Fargo my freshman or sophomore year and took second, which I don't know. That was the big tournament back then. There's not the big tournaments back then like there are now, in the sense of there's 3 national tournaments every weekend. I swear to God, go outside this pandemic. Back then there was only a couple big tournaments, and that's what people really push to go to. And I think there's still that nowadays. There's that real big push to the Fargo, to maybe post nationals and preseason nationals and the Ironman and Beast of the East and stuff like that. But I do think there's been such a grab of tournaments around the country that unfortunately I think it does dilute it a little bit, and not necessarily maybe Fargo, because when it comes to freestyle and Greco, there's not really any national tournaments. But in folk style, there's a trillion national tournaments, and I don't know what a definition of national tournament is anymore, but it used to be when you had somebody from damn near every state there competing. So
yeah, to me, still from a youth level anyway, there's the preseason, postseason, Tulsa were all like the real big real nationals. The other ones, I appreciate what they're doing, anything to help grow the sport, but yeah, there's only a few to me like true nationals.
Yeah, and I get it. People trying to grow the sport or get their own local tournament going or whatnot, but I don't know. Again, with that competing, you get back to that competing. I think it's really good to compete over the summer a little bit, but I'm a big believer in also trying to just make big gains. Clear your head a little bit. Competition, if you're ever going to get really good at competition, there's got to be a focus on it. There has to be a push to excel at a certain time period. You're always practicing for the future, right? You're practicing for your future high school state tournament, for your future in college to go try and win the national tournament of the Big Tens. And so there's a preparation leading up to it. And then there's, fine tuning, making sure your conditioning is top notch, and then you go compete. And it takes a lot mentally to start learning that game. I like sometimes getting away and having a solid 2-month period or a solid 3-month period where, you're not on your weight. You're not focusing on who's trying to win or win every go in the room. You're trying to go as hard as you can in the wrestling room. And you're trying to get back up when you get taken down and take it back to that guy and try to break your opponent. And when coach is working on stuff, in the corner, you're trying to actually develop that skill versus wondering, what am I going to eat tonight? Because I can only eat so much, and I got to have my weight down to here. And that's where I see some big gains for some of the kids in our room. They're still competing in the summer, but it's choice tournaments. It's your big tournaments, or it's here this month, and then I'm not wrestling again until a month and a half later, and that's why we do things like the Virginia Beach, where you have that everybody's done in February, and we're not doing anything March, we're not doing anything April other than train and get better. And then we still have most of May, and then all of a sudden in May, we have a tournament where we can try and peak and go out and compete, and therefore practice for down the road.
Wow. Hey, Eric, Rob and I always joke around saying, if we had to wrestle our kids or the level of these kids that are out there right now, that, we'd probably be doing a basketball podcast right now is what I'm guessing. So tell us, in your mind, how much the sport of wrestling has changed or evolved even since you've been a kid?
How much has the sport evolved?
Yes.
From what standpoint? Technically, or
from technique all the way to ability of wrestlers, even.
I think technique has definitely come a long ways. You go back, and there was fewer wrestlers doing the top level things. You can sit there and be like, well, I've never seen instant tilt. If you go back far enough, you'll find someone out there that was doing an instant tilt. And you'll go back there and you'll see somebody that was doing something nowadays that, funk. You think as funk as being something that's only real recent, but if you go back far enough, you'll find somebody that actually did pass a leg back then, but it wasn't widespread. In fact, it was usually very specific. If you saw someone that was really good in a certain area, well, that was their area of expertise, and maybe they weren't that good on the mat. Or maybe if they're really good on the mat, they weren't that good on their feet. I think one thing that's just changed phenomenally is how well-rounded the kids are, these top-level kids coming out of high school. And by top level, I don't mean necessarily the guy that goes in like Spencer Lee and wins a title as a freshman. I mean the entire class of kids that are maybe going wrestling D1. The top 50% of those kids are probably very, very well versed in wrestling. Obviously, there's a ton of room for fine tuning, and they're going to be a little bit better at this area versus that area. But overall, if you were to look at their wrestling as freshmen versus freshmen from the past, I think it'd be drastically different matches. Drastically different. You'd see a lot more different moves. You wouldn't see one guy where all he's trying to do is hit his patented double leg because that's all he has, or his patented sweep single, or Randy Lewis where it's all I want a guy on my leg because I'm going to try and throw him on their back. It's if we go upper body, great, I'm going to throw you on your head. We don't lock up upper body, maybe I'm going to be an ankle biter down on John Smith single. They have lots of moves in their arsenal.
So visualization and goal setting are some key words that we hear a lot about in wrestling these days. How do you work with your wrestlers on those items, on visualization and goal setting?
Again, I'm picking on your guys' podcast. I keep hearing from you guys, visualization is kind of new to sport and stuff. I disagree. I can remember, and again, I don't know if it was maybe as widespread, but I can actually remember Coach Dampier sitting us down in the wrestling room, and we had to shut off the lights, and we all had to sit there on our backs, and we had to just sit there and listen. And it was a guy, talking about working your way through a match and where you were and visualize yourself winning at the end and stuff. And so, I think there's that kind of visualization going on probably a lot longer than people suspect. It's just wasn't as widespread. But I think, to be honest, when I think of visualization, are you a dreamer? Like, do you dream of winning a state title? Do you win a national title? Do you sit there in your workouts? I can remember again, it was legal to sit in a sauna some of these times I talk about, but I can remember sitting in a sauna and talking about how great is it going to be if we win this tournament, or if I beat this guy, whether it be a Big Ten title or win the Midlands or whatever, win the national title. I can remember Lincoln McRavey winning the national title and throwing his things in the air and just thinking, what a feeling that must have been. Just a great feeling. And then I remember as I got to be a senior, I would talk about, Jody and Schwab, and you talk about like, man, like I win that title. That's what I'm going to do. Like freaking done, like got it done. And so I think if you've ever been that athlete that sits there and does dream about winning state titles, does dream about beating a certain opponent, I think you've already been doing it. I just think some people maybe don't believe in their dreams, and you got to believe you have the possibility of doing it. That's the true difference. You can sit there and think about something all you want, but if you don't really think you could actually pull it off, I don't know if you're really doing visualization. The idea is like, man, I could maybe do that. That would be amazing.
Nice.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Hey, Eric, I know you used to coach over at Augustana for a time span there, and I'm going to have you put your coaching hat on and kind of the philosophy, what you and Jody teach a lot of our wrestlers. But what are coaches looking for on the next tier generation of wrestlers? And are they just looking for a wrestler that's, you know, a 2-time state champion, whatever? Or what are you looking for in a wrestler when you are recruiting someone?
I think it goes back to that well-rounded. You know, you're looking for a well-rounded individual. You know, you recruit the parents too, and I think that's probably true to a certain degree. And I don't mean in the sense of you want your parent on your side so they push you know, that wrestler to your school. I think it's because you want to see kind of where the boundaries have been in their life so far. If you have a wrestler that is going to be a wild child, it's probably not somebody you want in your program. You know, there's a difference between work hard and play hard. And then there's the guy that's always trying to be the next crazy thing and the wildest. And you don't need those issues, you know. And I think there's been plenty of programs out there that maybe we're going the right direction. And then you have the wrong couple seeds come in and you start going this direction. And there comes that choice. Like, which way do you want to go? Like, yeah, if you can keep them in school and you can keep them out of trouble and whatever, then maybe you have a really good team. But the second they aren't going to class or they fail or they get in a fight or they get caught stealing or selling drugs or whatever, you're down. You're done. And you wasted all that time and commitment and effort. And I think it's becoming much, much more aware for guys. Like, yeah, we all, as a wrestling coach, we all want a great athlete. And we all want a polished wrestler. But at the same time, like, if the ability is there and you can teach the skill set, you'd much rather have the well-rounded kid who's going to go out and do a good job everywhere in their life. You know, you cannot be good in one area of your life at a certain task and whatnot and not be good in another. You know, like if you're a hard worker, you don't go to work and not work hard. You're just not. Like, yeah, you're good in the restroom, but all of a sudden you go to your job and you won't work. It doesn't work that way. You know, you kind of think of people in your head that I don't want to say slob, but you know what I mean? Messy.
Sure.
Just everything about them, you know, nothing seems to matter enough. But then you see them in other areas of their life and they struggle because they've just always let those little things go, and good enough was always good enough. And well, that's the kind of results you get is you know, sloppy results.
Yeah, makes sense. All right, now we have our OT sudden death question stuff here. So favorite football team?
Steelers, just because I lived in Pennsylvania for a little bit.
All right, you got your choice: a roller coaster or a tilt-a-whirl, Eric?
Neither. I don't like carnival rides.
Is it bags or is it cornhole?
We always called it bean bags growing up. Always called it bean bags.
Jackson County thing, huh?
Jackson County.
Fishing or golfing?
That is a tough one. Can I do both? Fish in the morning and golf in the afternoon?
We'll take it.
Sounds like a good day. Yeah. Is it state wrestling or states wrestling?
State tournament.
Favorite color, Eric?
Black.
If you could be a superhero, who would it be?
You know, I should have read through these. I'm not really sure on the superhero thing. I don't know. I told Jay I wanted to be authentic. I didn't realize where these are going to go.
No problem.
Okay. How about the longest you've ever wrestled someone in a practice? Who and where was it?
Well, I tell you what, you guys want a really good story for your podcast?
Oh, absolutely.
I'll give you a really great story. And it probably wasn't the absolute longest I've ever wrestled, but I'm going to tell you about a time that I went in and I got the better of Tom Brands for a day in practice. And the only reason I bring this up is because it only happened once, and it was probably an accident. It was an accident. But it was one of those things where I had hernia surgery, and I get cleared or whatever, and I came back, and I think I'd wrestled Josh Budke the day before or whatever. And so not wrestling a bunch. I was pretty healthy, not banged up, probably a little heavier than usual. And I remember Tom came in as Tom wanted to wrestle. And if anybody has ever looked at match strategy, there's, again, your battery and your ability, right? And I remember somehow I got a takedown, and I'm not a bad wrestler, and I was able to ride him for a little bit or whatnot. And he was pissed off. And so he took like another bad shot or something. And looking back now, it's very easy to analyze what exactly went on. But he started getting frustrated, and then the more tired he got, the easier it was to hold him down, which was making me angrier. So then he was really just taking bad shots. And so long story short, and I remember Lincoln McRae, I'm walking out of the room, and, all of a sudden Tom just whips his headgear. He's like, I'm done, angry, just storms off, slams the thing. And I'm sitting there on cloud 9, like absolute cloud 9. Like, did this just happen? There's Lincoln like, hey man, good job today, Juergens, and all this stuff. And so I walk out, and I'm floating. I am floating. And you got to remember, back then, and I'm sure it's the same way now, you don't wrestle the same guy 2 days in a row, ever. You just don't do it. And so I go in the locker room the next day, get ready for practice, and I feel his hand on my shoulder. And I was like, I'll see you out there. And I turn around, and it's Tom, and he's already walking out there. And I'm sitting there looking at the other guys in the locker room like, what? We just wrestled yesterday. Is he serious? And the doors closing. So I go out in the wrestling room, and I proceed. I don't know how long it was, but it felt like probably about 7 weeks. I mean, he beat the living snot out of me just to make sure I understood that he was a lot better at wrestling than I was. And that might have been one of the worst, longest times I could ever remember wrestling. I don't know how long it went, but it was a long time. Let's just put it that way.
Okay. Learned who Alpha was that day, huh?
I learned who the Alpha was.
That's great. Great story. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that one. I almost don't want to ask this question after that awesome answer, but what's your favorite food?
Any seafood. I really like seafood.
All right. Last one here, Eric. Best quote of all times.
Tough times don't last. Tough people do.
Awesome. Well, Eric, this has been a lot of fun, man. We really, really appreciate your time.
Awesome.
We look forward to continuing to follow Young Guns, and hopefully we'll all have people back on the mat real soon.
Awesome. Well, hey, thanks for having me on, guys.
All right. Thank you for tuning in. Please share this podcast with your friends. Give us a like and a follow on Facebook and Twitter at QCA Wrestle, and keep an eye out for more QCA wrestling content coming soon.